Hey, welcome in.
Welcome to the Arrowhead Addict podcast.
We are here coming to you live. The Kansas City Chiefs are going to the Super Bowl. You only win a Super Bowl 2 times every 5 years, right? Oh! The warm-up act is over. Let's bring in Melissa Etheridge, massive Chiefs fan. Melissa,
Super Bowl champion, two-time Pro Bowler, and Trent Green. Trent Green, how you doing?
Hey, what's going on, guys?
he picked it up! He picked it up! He's gonna score! We'll see you next week, but until then, as always, go Chiefs.
Welcome into the Arrowhead Addict podcast. My name is Price Carter. This is the OG Hour, and you will notice I am not an OG. I am an NG. I am a new gangsta. And I'm not one of Patrick Allen or Matt Verderam today. Patrick Allen has a case of the bracketology sickness today, I believe. Just kidding. He might actually be sick. He's got a young one. They're always sick. And Verderam wasn't scheduled to be on the show this week. So I am going to be taking over hosting duties today. We are going to be talking about a couple of different things. Got a couple of topics I want to talk about. I'm going to be debuting my do not draft list, which is going to be 7 players that I have some real concerns about that I think that the Chiefs should stray away from. I'll tell you why. And then I also have a little bit of a question to ask about, a philosophical question about this Chiefs' current status and where we think they might be best off headed to the draft. And how close is this team to being elite at a certain part? So we will get to that here in a little bit. Thank you so much for hanging out. This will be interactive as well. So if you do have some questions that you want to put in the chat, maybe you're listening to this as you're watching March Madness. And I know Clemson is kind of throwing up on themselves right now against a lower seed. I'm not a huge bracketology guy, full discourse, just because this usually takes heart right in the middle of the draft season, which is my big thing. So I usually don't have enough bandwidth to pay attention to it. But if there's any great bracketology moments, let us know in the chat. And speaking of your bracket, we want to talk to you real quick about Underdog. Put on your dancing shoes and pick up your phone. It's time to make picks on March college basketball. With Underdog, you can bring that excitement to wherever you want. Playing on their app is as easy as picking higher or lower on player stats like points, assists, rebounds, and more. Get those picks right and you could win up to 1,000 times your money. Millions of fans have won big. Will you be next? Get in the game by signing up for Underdog using our promo code Arrowhead Addict. That's all one word. Join in on the fun when you sign up with our promo code Arrowhead Addict. Claim your special offer today and get up to $1,000 in bonus credits instantly upon first deposit. Must be 18 years or older. 21 in Massachusetts and Arizona, and present in a state where Underdog Fantasy operates. Void where prohibited. Terms apply. Concerned with your play, call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit www.npcgambling.org. In Arizona, call the 1-800-NEXT-STEP or text NEXT STEP to 53342. In New York, call the 24/7 Hope line at 1-877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY to 467-369. All right, so earlier today on my Twitter, I posted a poll, and let me check and see what the results are at right now. But I asked a question. I asked, which unit of the current Chiefs roster do you feel has a better chance at being elite? And then when I said elite, I said top 5. And I asked, Chiefs offense, Chiefs defense, which group is closer to being elite? Right now, it's got 176 votes. Still got 19 hours remaining. Chiefs defense is winning 55% to 44% for the Chiefs offense. And the reason I wanted to bring this up is to kind of look at what the Chiefs have right now and where they are headed in the draft. And ultimately, how can this team get where it wants to go? So much was focused on the 3P and how the Chiefs could do something that had never been done before. But now that that isn't really an option anymore, or much, much more difficult, the Chiefs, they obviously want to continue winning Super Bowls. But what is the path for them to do that? I think for a lot of us, we look at the Chiefs and we just see Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid, and we just expect this team to be a top 5 offense every single year. When in reality, that's not really been the story for a while now. In 2023, they won the Super Bowl. Their offense was 15th in points and 9th in yards. This year, when they went to the Super Bowl, their offense was 15th in points and 16th in yards. Meanwhile, this is where we see the flip, the switch flip, right? In 2019, the Chiefs won their very first Super Bowl. The defense was 7th in points, but 17th in yards. In 2020, they go to the Super Bowl, lose to the Bucks. They were 10th in points, 16th in yards. 2022, that young defense got that wave of talent after the Tyreek Hill trade. They're 16th in points, 12th in yards. Last year, 2023, elite defense, 2nd in points, 2nd in yards. And this year, 4th in points, 9th in yards. Let's talk a little bit about what they have on the roster. First off, let's go to the question, can the Chiefs offense be elite? There's a lot of questions that have to be answered for that to happen. I think when you look at it from the 10,000-foot view of Andy Reid, Patrick Mahomes, you get Rashee Rice back, year 2 of Xavier Worthy, you think that they might want to upgrade the running game. What are they going to get from Travis Kelce? I think it's very easy to look at it and say that they retain Trey Smith, you swap Trey Smith out for Joe Thuney. There's a chance that this offense can get back to being top 5, especially when you think about what you saw from Rashee Rice in those first 3 games, because we still have not seen the vision of Hollywood Brown, Rashee Rice, and Xavier Worthy all on the field together. That's a lot of speed, and that's a lot of yak ability. That should open up things for guys like Travis Kelce, Isaiah Pacheco, Kareem Hunt in the running game. But to me, there's some questions that have to be answered before we can say that the Chiefs' offense is elite. The first part of it is you have a whole new left side of the offensive line that's just unknown. Jalen Moore has still not had a full season of starting at left tackle under his belt. And whether the Chiefs bring in a rookie, I would love, and I don't think it's going to happen, but there's still quite a few guys out there that could come in and serve as a little bit of a backup tackle. Maybe some people who are still sitting out there that their chances of being a starting tackle are dwindling, like DJ Humphries. Tyron Smith started most of the season at left tackle for the Jets. Would Donovan Smith be willing to do that? To me, that is a huge raise the floor position where you at least have 2 competent guys that you feel like we can get through the season with at left tackle. And that's honestly the move that the Chiefs should have thought about making last year, though it sounded like Donovan Smith was dealing with an injury that pretty much sidelined him most of the year. But that left side of the line, it's still unknown. You've got the best center in the NFL in Creed Humphrey. You've retained one of the better guards in the NFL with Trey Smith, and you're at least going to get adequate right tackle play from Jawan Taylor. But that left side, that's obviously the more important side, and that's not half, but close to half of your offensive line that you're replacing. So there's that question. Then you go for the wide receiver room. We talked about that, year 2 of Xavier Worthy, how exciting that can look. Rashee Rice looks like a potential wide receiver 1. But the one thing that is consistent for this wide receiver room is the amount of injuries and the amount of vulnerability and volatility of this wide receiver room. You have Rashee Rice, who's likely going to be missing games for a suspension. You also have an injury with him that he's coming back from. Same thing for Xavier Worthy. Again, we don't think that he's going to get suspended, but that story might not be over. And the NFL is unpredictable with their suspensions. Hollywood Brown, not known for staying healthy. And, while I think there were some promising moments in the few games that he did play, he more or less disappeared in the playoffs. So there's some questions there. Juju Smith-Schuster, not a guy particularly known for his health either. You lost Justin Watson. You lost McCole Hardman. It looks like most of those guys they let walk, but there could be a very easy situation where you're without 2 of those guys, a game without Hollywood Brown and Rashee Rice, a game without Hollywood Brown and Xavier Worthy, a game without Rashee Rice and Xavier Worthy. Like it can get thin pretty quickly at wide receiver. Then you have the tight end room. Kelce, I think at this point, his days of being a guy who should be getting 100 targets are over. He's not a guy that you want to filter the offense through. At this point, he needs to be closer to that Jason Witten role where he's coming in on 3rd down and moving the chains. I think one of the biggest things that the Chiefs need to do this offseason and this season is make the offense no longer about Travis Kelce. 1, to help Patrick Mahomes and the rest of the offense flow whenever Travis Kelce does retire, likely at the end of the season. And 2, Travis Kelce was one of the leading snap getters on offense. The only people who took more offensive snaps than Travis Kelce this season was Patrick Mahomes and the starting offensive line. That cannot be the case this year. You're just not going to get the best version of him. That frankly should have been true 2 or 3 years ago, even when he was 33, 32. You've got Jared Wiley, the 3rd tight end, who we didn't really get to see much, but 1 catch. Can he develop into a blocker? How does he recover from the ACL injury? You have Noah Gray, who's the 2nd tight end. Is this an opportunity for him to get more snaps. Then we still have a lot of unknown in the running back room. You know what Kareem Hunt can bring you, but they cannot give him the workload that they did last year. It was just too much. He's another year older. Isaiah Pacheco, is he more the 2023 version of himself, or is he more the 2024 version of himself? A lot of variance there. You've got Elijah Mitchell, who you brought in, who has not played a game in over a year. Can he get healthy? Can he stay healthy? The upside of that room is very high, but the floor of that room is also very low. All those things come back to, do you think that this Chiefs offense can be a top 5 unit this year? And I'm not sure. I really don't know. You look at Patrick Mahomes and you look at Andy Reid and you think this should happen. And let's be real. I don't think that Patrick Mahomes has had his best year the last couple of years, and there's reasons for it. The offensive line hasn't played well. There was a time where his wide receivers appeared to be actively sabotaging him almost with drops that turned into interceptions. But if we're going to see the best version of this offense, it's going to take a step from Patrick Mahomes. I do think that getting Rashee Rice back will be a big help. And I think getting another season of Xavier Worthy to be Patrick Mahomes friendly, for him to trust them. But let's be real. The last time we saw the Chiefs play, Patrick Mahomes was a big part of why the Chiefs lost. He did not play well. And that's okay to admit, because there's only 2 teams that made it that far, and they came about as close as any team ever has to three-peating. He's allowed to have a bad day, but it was a bad day to have a bad day, as Andy Reid said. And it was very obvious that the offense was slow and lacking explosiveness and separation, and they weren't prepared for what happened. So with all that being said, to me, the likelihood of this Chiefs offense being elite this year, I think is pretty slim, or at least moderately slim. Now, I reserve the right to change my opinion with more information. If they come out with a really offensive heavy draft and they're grabbing 2 or 3 offensive players that I really like, I might start feeling a little bit differently about this, especially because what version of Patrick Mahomes we're going to see this year? We're going to see that guy who was highly motivated after Tyreek Hill left. And I shouldn't use the word motivated. I don't think that Patrick Mahomes tries harder, doesn't try harder. But I do think that there is a constant evolution to his game that is happening. And I think he took big steps that year that Tyreek Hill was traded to checking the ball down, to being more diverse, to, letting players win in their own ways. And now we've got to see another version of him, a version without a true star, because while he's not had a star wide receiver for quite some time, he's always had the star in Travis Kelce. Well, Travis Kelce isn't a star anymore. At least his play isn't. He's definitely dating a superstar, and he's a superstar off the field, but his play is no longer superstar caliber. Let's see that next version of Patrick Mahomes. Now, when you go to the defense, this is what I think is encouraging. I think there's a real chance that this defense can remain an elite top 5 unit with just a little bit of work. First off, you look at what you've got in place. You've got a superstar along the defensive line with Chris Jones. So far, they've lost Derek Nottie off the defensive line. Mike Pennell's still sitting out there as a free agent. So is Charles Omenihu. From what it sounds like from Nate Taylor, who's done some reporting on this, Charles Omenihu could sit and wait until after the draft. He could be signed sooner than that. His agent's being patient, as he described it. Nevertheless, you basically could bring back your entire starting defensive line, say maybe Derek Nottie, who wasn't really moving the needle a lot, and then head into a draft that has a ton of depth at defensive tackle, at edge. It's some of the strongest positions in the draft. Your linebacker room is still intact. You retain Nick Bolton. You've got Drew Tranquill back. You've got Leo Chanel back. If you wanted to raise the room of that floor, there's lots of guys to do that in the draft as well, too, on day 2 particularly. You upgraded at cornerback. Your cornerback position is definitively better than it was last year. Not only because you upgraded Najee Johnson and Joshua Williams by bringing in Christian Fulton, but, you just put an all-pro back in the slot in Trent McDuffie. Safety, obviously, losing Justin Reed's a big loss. I think that they're confident in what Jaden Hicks can bring to the safety position. And I also wonder, what could happen here? What can we do to raise the floor of the safety room? Maybe they feel like they can get Shamari Connor back there. I also say safety is a position that they have routinely been able to find on day 2 of the draft, on day 3 of the draft. Do they bring in another guy like a Lathan Ransom from Ohio State? There's a lot of guys that can be had there and just raise the floor of that unit. I truly think if the Chiefs invest in, with an investment in the draft, go look at the Rams defense. They last year stacked picks back to back of Jared Verse and the defensive tackle whose name is escaping me right now, also from Florida State. But they stacked a bunch of defensive line picks right after another, and that became one of the best young pass rushes in the game. And the Chiefs, they have an ability to do that as well too. And if they do something like a Walter Nolan in the first round, followed up by a Landon Jackson or a JT Tuimoloau or someone like that, what can that look like? What does that look like on top of Chris Jones? Do they bring back Charles Omenihu? I think you can get to a situation pretty quickly where this defense is the stronger unit on this team. Throw in the coaching. Braden Fisk, by the way, from Florida State was the name of that defensive tackle with Jared Verse. Throw in the coaching that the Chiefs have with Steve Spagnuolo. I think there's a chance that this defense can carry this team once again. And the offense gets all of the conversation. It's a frustration point that we've had. But even in the Super Bowl where the Chiefs fell short, clearly, the defense played well enough for them to be in that game. The offense was what collapsed. It's what handed the Eagles 14 points in bad field position in another spot. So overall, I think there's a chance here that the defense is you put 2 or 3 picks in it. Like, don't pay if the best player available is a cornerback. Christian Fulton has never made it through a season healthy. You're 1 or 2, hamstring injuries away from seeing a healthy dose of Joshua Williams and Ozzie Johnson. So if the Chiefs go with like a Azarie Thomas, a Trey Amos, a Savone Ravel, a player like that at pick 31 or early in day 2, there's depth to be had here in this corner room. Or if they want to do like an Xavier Watts or something, upgrade the safety position, you're going to be looking and go, that's not this position. That's not that position. That's not the position that I thought that they were supposed to have. I really think that there's a case that this defense can carry this team once again, partially because of the coaching and partially because look at the investments they've made. They've got 2 first-round edge players, a $30 million defensive tackle, a $15 million linebacker, another linebacker that's still being paid pretty well. You've got a 4th-round pick, a 2nd-round pick, a 3rd round. Like, those guys are all over the place. Brian Cook, Jaden Hicks, Shamari Connor, and then, you have an all-pro corner. And he's going to be playing in his all-pro spot. So I do think with all those things being said, don't be surprised if the Chiefs go heavy on defense. And to me, I obviously not breaking a lot of ground here that bringing back Charles Omenihu would be a good thing for this team, especially because we've just never really seen the fully healthy full season of Charles Omenihu experience due to his own doing with suspension and due to that ACL tear. But I do think that there's a real chance here that this Chiefs defense could be what carries this team. We'd love to see the offense, right? Like, I personally think like Patrick Mahomes legacy wise, Patrick Mahomes narrative wise could really use another MVP season, another 40 touchdown, 4,500 yard season, because of course, like every good Chiefs fan, I'm always worried about Patrick Mahomes legacy and where he fits into the NFL history. But those questions around the wide receivers, the lack of explosive run game, those type of things, I don't know. It could be more challenging to see that out of the wide receiver room, out of the running back room, out of the tight end room. And let's be clear, I think Matt Verderame has put it very distinctly. The Chiefs are going to go as far as that left tackle position, that left side of the line will let them go this year. So if Jalen Moore ends up being a flop, it starts getting really hard because the answers, they aren't any better. In fact, they might be a little bit worse because you don't have Joe Thuney who can kick out there to left tackle now. Joe Thuney, for almost every game this year, played serviceable enough left tackle for this team to win 15 games, for them to beat the MVP in an AFC championship game, and it just wasn't enough there at the end. So they've got to continue to raise the floor of that offensive line. Again, I'll just come back to what's Tyron Smith up to? What's Donovan Smith up to? What's DJ Humphries up to? That could be like, honestly, Chiefs offseason right now is sitting in a like B- realm for me. If they get one of those guys back in here and are willing for them to kind of work into the offense and be basically a glorified plan B, that could be huge because we just don't know with Jalen Moore. Give us a hot take here. I can't read the name. I can't see who says it. A hot take. Let's see here. I'm assuming you're going to ask for a football hot take. Uh, One of my football hot takes is that I'm not necessarily sure the Chiefs made the right move by keeping Trey Smith over Joe Tooney. Joe Tooney was the better player this year. Most everyone agrees with that. And I think that the Chiefs could have ended up paying less for Joe Tooney than they paid for Trey Smith, a guy with Trey Smith who is an average pass blocker, not fantastic pass blocker. And the Chiefs, what they do, their strengths, passing the ball. They've leaned into more man and gap duo run styles, but that's Trey Smith's strength. And I'm not necessarily sure who is going to be taking the best advantage of that. I think Trey Smith could have been more valuable to another team. But truthfully, I think the mistake that the Chiefs made was a year ago. Like if they wanted to try this thing where they wanted to trade Trey Smith, they could have done that a year ago and kept Joe Tooney and been proactive about his number. You've got a guy who literally was an all-pro this year. Then you have the floor of him kicking out to left tackle. He's going to make less money because he's not young and resetting the market. And, they've continued to now hang this salary cap number around their neck. No, I will say, we know that Trey Smith is the younger player. And I don't have a huge problem with them keep selecting him. I do understand the thought process here. The execution of the process was a little frustrating. I will say that, where once again they're doing this, but now the Chiefs, by all accounts, they're still sitting at around $15 to $20 million in cap space. If they pull that lever and get Trey Smith done here in the next couple of weeks, months, etc., they're going to be, because they chose to convert all of Patrick Mahomes and all of Trey Smith. So maybe there's something going on there. Sometimes can be NFL talent that is quality NFL talent that's available around training camp time because of those June 1st cuts. I know a name that was brought up by Bill Barnwell is Matthew Judon, the edge rusher from the Falcons that was with the Patriots. This is a guy who was in the running for Defensive Player of the Year just a couple of years ago, led the NFL in sacks. That could be appealing. That could be, a floor raiser. Again, instead of Charles Omenihu, Matthew Judon. I think Omenihu is a little bit better of a fit, but I just wrote a film review on a guy from Ole Miss, Jared Ivey, a lot like Charles Omenihu. There's another guy from SNU, Elijah Roberts, a lot like Charles Omenihu, that 6'6", 285 pounds, inside out versatility, sets a great edge, power, length, and can kick inside and win with speed in there. So maybe they see that guy in the draft and say, hey, let's go get a guy like Judon, who's a little bit more traditional edge rusher, a little bit more explosive, even though they're on the wrong side of 30. And then we do that sort of guy in the draft. Which brings me to the other thing I wanted to talk to you all today about. And I want to be careful because these are not players that I hate. First off, I don't hate any player. I mean, there's a couple of players who have had such terrible off the field issues that I probably wouldn't want my kid owning their jersey, or probably wouldn't want to hang out in a room with them. But I don't hate any of these players. But these are players that I have some real reservations about the Chiefs drafting this year. And we'll get into why. And some of these players are names that you'll know, and some of them you won't know. I tried to pick names that weren't too deep in the draft. Also, let's be real, right? If you're sitting there playing blackjack and you've got 15 and you ask the dealer to give you another card to hit on a 15, well, if you're betting $5 on that hand, it's real easy to hit on a 15 and hope you get that 7, right? But if you are betting $100 on that hand, you're probably a lot more likely to stay and hold at 15. The stakes, they mean something when it comes to this. So it's a lot harder for me to have this huge reservation about a player that's going to be a day 3 prospect, because at that end, it's a flyer. You got a guy who's maybe he's got an injury history. Well, if you're spending a 6th or 7th round pick on him, it's a flyer. Or maybe he's not a great scheme fit, but you like the tools or something like that. Again, late day 3, early day 3, or late day 2, you can palate that a little bit more. But when you start getting into those 1st, 2nd, and 3rd round picks, those guys need to hit. And you can see the NFL. Look at what's going on with the Bengals right now. Not T. Higgins and Jamar Chase, but the reason why that roster is in such a big disparity of talent is because they have not hit on their 1st and 2nd and 3rd round picks consistently over the last few years. Guys like Miles Murphy, they haven't come through that they want to. Dax Hill's another name. And now they have the situation where they just are literally stars and scrubs. So with the investment here, most of these guys are going to, I think, will be day 1 or day 2 names. A couple of them have been recently mocked to the Chiefs in some of the big consensus mocks. I always encourage you all to pay attention to what the big mock drafters are out there doing. Your Daniel Jeremiah's, your Todd McShays, your Mel Kipers. Those are guys who do their mocks with their ears, not just their eyes. So some guys, they make mock drafts on just what they think fits and who they think is a good player. Where some of these guys are more talking about what they're hearing around the league and maybe what the team is sniffing around here. So the first player on my do not draft list, it's going to be a name that a lot of you recognize, and it's Joshua Simmons, the offensive tackle from Ohio State. Daniel Jeremiah had him as the Chiefs pick in his mock draft this week. Daniel Jeremiah is one of the best. He had them taking Josh Simmons at 31. Here are my reservations and why I'm not sure I want to draft this guy. First off, he's coming off a major patella injury. This injury is one that has not a huge track record of recovery. There are guys in the NFL whose careers have been ruined by this patellar injury. Drake Jackson was an edge rusher, I believe, from Arkansas or Oklahoma. He's on the 49ers. He had the same injury, and he's basically done. He did not play. He entered it in 2023. He did not play at all in 2024. And the general manager of the 49ers basically said that they're not sure if he'll ever be able to resume football activities this year at the combine. This is also a guy, Joshua Simmons, that, when you're talking about his strengths and what he did, there was a technician element to there was a strength element to his game, but he wasn't a super fleet of foot, super athlete. So if we're talking about knocking out some of that athleticism for a guy who already wasn't the most athletic, that's a concern. Todd McShay, formerly of ESPN, now has a show on Spotify, the McShay Report he writes. I recommend it as a listen. He brought up that some teams have some maturity concerns about Joshua Simmons. I tweeted out a clip of that from his show. If you want to go check it out on my Twitter, I don't know a lot more about it than that. He said maturity concerns. So that may not be the same as character concerns, right? I don't think that there's anything criminal here, but it's just one more thing to fold into your draft analysis. Next up, and this might be one of the biggest ones, 6'4", 33-inch arms. That's the same height as Kingsley Suamataia and 1 inch shorter arms for Joshua Simmons. This is not, your 6'6", 35-inch arm tackle that the Chiefs like. They like those bigger, longer guys. And I do think that the lack of length for him can show up. Again, if you're talking about knocking off some of his burst and athleticism out of his kick step and pass protection, and he's got 33-inch arms, that could be an issue. This would be the shortest arm tackle that the Chiefs have ever drafted. The Chiefs have never drafted a tackle in the Andy Reid era with sub 34-inch arms. Keep that in mind. And then one thing else I'll throw this out is this time last year, I really keep an eye and ear on the draft year round. It's a big part of what I do because understanding the story of a player and where they start and where they finish the season and where they're getting mock drafted in the season, it adds context to them. Nobody this time of year last year was saying, oh, baby, Joshua Simmons out of Ohio State, this guy is going to be a top pick next year. I remember hearing that about Will Campbell because you'd sit there and watch the Jaden Daniels film or the Brian Thomas Jr. film, and you'd see Will Campbell just routinely shutting out guys on the edge. Joshua Simmons really kind of started becoming a buzzy name this year. He only played, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 games this year. He only played 7 games, about 6.5 because he left the Oregon game injured. These are the teams that he stacked up his great performances in that he started getting lots of eyes on him. Akron, Western Michigan, Marshall. Well, you say, oh, Marshall, Mike Green, the edge rusher, he's a first-round pick. They faced each other 3 times in that game, by the way. So that wasn't exactly a clash of titans. Michigan State and Iowa. And then, of course, the Oregon game, he left injured. So there's just not a huge, high level of competition that you saw there that you're just saying, wow, he stacked up great performances against, these high-caliber pass rushes. So between the injury, between the maturity concerns, between the lack of length, and between the level of competition, now he did play all last year, but last year was not that year where you're sitting here saying this is a star. To me, at pick 31, I have concerns. Next up on my list, a guy that at one time was a lot of people's number 1 or number 2 overall pick in this draft behind Travis Hunter, and this is James Pierce Jr., the edge from Tennessee. First off, some of these guys on this list, I have them on here not because I think that they're bad guys or not because I think that they're going to be bad NFL players, but because I don't think that they match what the Chiefs do. That's predominantly the case here with James Pierce. First off, James Pierce kind of has a unique frame. He's 6'5", 245 pounds with 33 and 5/8 arms. Now, at 245 and 6'5", that's pretty lanky. You know, a guy like Joshua Uche, who was in here, he was 6'1", 240. 6'5", 245. That's pretty lean for an edge rusher. He is a stand-up edge rusher exclusively. Now, those flashes of him as winning as a stand-up edge rusher, as a pass rusher, they're special. And those are the things that a lot of people thought were going to make him a first-round pick. But he didn't stack that on top of each other. He didn't stack a great senior year on top of his junior year. The run defense is poor to very poor. He is not going to be a player that's going to be able to live on the field on early downs. I don't see a guy here that makes sense for the Chiefs. I don't see a guy here that makes sense for a lot of NFL teams. And from what I understand, from the circles that I run in, there were a lot of maturity concerns and a lot of professional concerns about him in the meetings at the Combine. Too long didn't read. Basically, a lot of teams did not feel that he was taking the meeting serious, that there was a lack of focus, that there was a lack of respect. Again, these are not players that I think will fail, but I think there's enough questions here that I'm taking them off my list. So James Pierce Jr., the edge out of Tennessee, not a great scheme fit, some maturity questions, some vulnerability, some volatility there too. He has big games, but they're inconsistent. The flashes are there. This is a guy that, like, you know, you can see it a few years later where it's like, oh yeah, remember that guy when he was going to be something, and now he's not getting his 5th-year option picked up. Next name. This one might hit close to home for some of you. This is a guy that a lot of people like to mock to the Chiefs, and it's Harold Fannin Jr., the tight end out of Bowling Green. My questions: 6'3", 241 pounds. He's literally lighter than James Pierce, the edge rusher that we just talked about, by the way. Makes him exclusively a pass catcher, virtually no blocking upside at the NFL level. Now, I will say he's a hustle blocker, and there are some nice clips of him blocking, but at Bowling Green, right? The level of competition there, it's just not the same. I do not think that this is a guy that you can trust in any way to block on the line of scrimmage, whether it be as an H or a Y. Now, can he chip someone out of the slot or a stand-up? Sure, maybe. But this is not a guy that you can rely on doing any sort of blocking for you as a tight end. It's like, okay, well, you know, Travis Kelce's not a big blocker. You know, Sam Laporta wasn't particularly known for his blocking, even though he came from Iowa. But here's the other concern. A 7.64 relative athletic score makes him not that explosive against higher level competition. When you watch him, I do not see an explosive high level athlete. He looks explosive on the field against Bowling Green talent, but he's not overtly fast. His speed is more straight line speed than it is explosive. The contested catch rate is average. He's not a super refined route runner. I will say there is some pretty good in-game testing scores from him as far as the GPS tracking goes. I just don't see a guy who is going to be able to separate with athleticism for high-level athletes. To me, I just didn't see a fluid route runner. I see a lot of straight line speed, little to no yards after catch. Now, he was highly, highly productive, the most productive tight end in college football this year. With all of those things factoring in, to me, he's just not a guy that I want to be the one that finds out on. I like a tight end who can do some blocking. I don't need a full, a classic Rob Gronkowski blocker and route runner. I just don't think there's much yak upside there. I don't think there's much explosive upside there. I think there's no blocking upside there. And I think there's questions about level of competition. Tight ends take a little bit. If you're drafting Harold Fannin Jr. in the spots that I think he's going to go, which is the 2nd or 3rd round, I think there's a good chance that draft pick does nothing for you this year and probably won't later. Just compare him to what Jared Wiley was. He's not nearly as productive as a tight end as Harold Fannin, but Jared Wiley gave you basically nothing even before the injury. And that's because you got to be able to find your way on the field somehow. And to me, having Harold Fannin as a package only player, he's just not an explosive enough athlete. You want to make a package player for Xavier Worthy, a guy with 4.22 speed? Okay, that makes sense, right? But not for Harold Fannin. I'm taking him off my list. This one might hit close to home for some of you guys too. There's probably a Hawkeye fan in the chat. There's lots of Iowa players here, lots of Iowa fans here. But I'm taking Caleb Johnson, the running back out of Iowa, off my draft list. This one isn't as much about the talent. I think he's a talented player. I think that I could see him in the second or third round for sure. To me, it's more of a scheme fit thing than anything. Nice size for him, 6'1", 224 pounds. A modest athlete, 4.58 speed. Guys, the testing for the running backs this year was insane. So if you see other people being like, oh man, like compare his 40-yard dash to Quinshon Judkins or compare it to Travion Henderson, or this class was bonkers with testing. 4.58 speed is definitely suitable for an NFL running back, especially whenever you factor in how often do you see NFL running backs get to their top speed? How often is there that clear-cut lane where they can get out in the open field and exercise that 4.4 speed? It's not very often, right? Really what you want with the running back is a guy who can turn a 4-yard carry into an 8-yard carry, an 8-yard carry into a 15-yard carry. But my concerns about Caleb Johnson, first off, when you see his tape, there's a lot of really good blocking. I mean, Iowa, they develop good offensive linemen. You know, that's just kind of what they do. They're corn-born. They're born and raised to block. And the offensive line, I thought, blocked really well for him. The big thing here is the type of carries that he has. Over 109 zone carries versus under 50 gap man carries. The Chiefs, a few years ago, like 6 or 7 years ago, back in kind of the Jamal Charles days, Caleb Johnson would have been a great fit. But over the years, the Chiefs have really started becoming more of a man gap duo power scheme. Basically at a high level, right? Zone blocking, we're blocking to an area, right? It's particularly outside zone. So the ball is snapped, the linemen are moving. Sorry, I'm gesturing with my hands. The linemen are moving this way or moving this way. The running back is going out, trying to find the run lane and then cutting in towards that run lane. The Chiefs, they don't really do that anymore, partially because they don't really have a guy who can do that. Early career Kareem Hunt could. They run a few of those plays a game now with late stage Kareem Hunt just to basically keep teams honest. Caleb Johnson particularly runs that sort of scheme. He runs it well. And if you're a team that utilizes that, he would be a great fit for you. The Chiefs do not utilize that scheme very much anymore. Now, I will say this. If you want to tell me the Chiefs want to get back to more outside zone to become more explosive, the pieces are there. They bring in Elijah Mitchell from the 49ers, a heavy outside zone team. They bring in Jalen Moore. Same thing, a 49ers player. They have a highly explosive athletic guard at left guard now, because you put Kingsley Suamata'ia's athleticism testing into the guard category. He's one of the most athletic guards in the NFL now. You've got Creed Humphrey. You've got Trey Smith, right? So, like, if you could put him into the system, right, he'd be a great pick. It's just, are you going to change that system? Are you going to change to an outside zone heavy scheme? That's something that would be an Andy Reid decision and a scheme system. The other thing for Caleb Johnson, as far as the passing productivity, mostly dump offs and screens. He had a really big screen against my Cornhuskers, unfortunately, the last game of the year. That still bothers me because I swear it was the delay of game on that field goal, but we'll let it go. Not really, but the passing production at this point, it's more of dump offs and screens than it is a guy who's winning out in space and running real routes and not really a down the field threat as a receiver. Now, again, I think Caleb Johnson's going to be a good player. It's just going to be like with the 49ers or the Vikings or one of those teams that runs a lot of outside zone. Next on my do not draft list, this one drives me crazy. I just don't get it. I'm not sure why. I literally think it's just we love Miami players thing, especially because a lot of people are watching Cam Ward right now, the likely number one overall pick quarterback out of Miami, but it's Elijah Arroyo, the tie-in out of Miami. First off, and I do mean first off, a single season in his college career of over 100 yards. 100 yards, he has eclipsed that mark once in his career. And it was the year that he had the number one overall pick at quarterback, because Cam Ward was a transfer. Cam Ward has not always been at Miami. So he gets the number one overall pick quarterback, and he finally eclipses that 100-yard mark. He had 600 or 700 yards this season, a fairly okay season. Now, why has he struggled to get over 100 yards? It's because he does not stay on the field. Major injury history. He has averaged 9 games played a year. He has several seasons where he's got 2 or 3 games, and then a couple where he's got 6 or 7, and then this year where he had a bunch. He couldn't test at the combine. He blew up the Senior Bowl. Elijah Arroyo's stock was through the roof at the Senior Bowl. Well, he got hurt, and now he can't test at the combine, and he'll do it at his pro day. Didn't even measure at the combine. That is not a guy that I want to be taking in the realm that he's going to be taken, which is probably day 2. Tight ends, again, they're a slow developing position. The injury history is there. I didn't see a guy who I think is anything more than a push and pester blocker at the tight end position. 1 missed tackle forced the whole year. He has little to no yak ability and is mostly a guy who's going to win up the seams. Now, the ADOT is pretty nice. It's 11.1, so he wins down the field. Cam Ward also be slinging that ball. Cam Ward, he's always slinging it. But the injuries alone are a reason why I don't want the Chiefs to draft this guy. Then you throw in modest blocking, not a long track record of productivity, little to no yak. By the way, like Jared Wiley is also a guy who kind of profiles the same as far as it, but much bigger, right? Like Jared Wiley's a much bigger frame as well too. I just don't see it with Elijah Arroyo. I'm not sure why others see it so much with him. I think, again, it's just the Cam Ward thing. They're watching Cam Ward film. They see the best of him, which was this year. But you go back, the injuries, this is a guy, take him off your board, medical red flag. This guy's a little bit more obvious. I think a lot of people probably already got onto this, but I'm not sure the Chiefs have. The Chiefs, they have an affinity for speed. They love it, they covet it, and they do not really care about how big or not big you are at the wide receiver position. And at the Senior Bowl, Tez Johnson, the wide receiver from Oregon, was carving people up with his speed. Now, the Senior Bowl is not always a great representation of what players really are as route runners and receivers, those wide receiver cornerback duos that you see, because the wide receivers, they're running TikTok routes. Okay. There's starting and stopping and cutting, something that, like, hey, if you ran that route, the quarterback is like retired now because he was in the pocket for so long. But Tez Johnson was carving it up out there. Tez Johnson goes to the combine. He measures in at 5'9", 154 pounds. That is 2 inches shorter than Xavier Worthy and 10 pounds lighter than Xavier Worthy. There was already lots of concern about Xavier Worthy. You watched every snap of Xavier Worthy this season. There are times where his size limits what he can do. Now, Xavier Worthy can fly, and you see that in the game. The problem with Tez Johnson, he ran a 4.54 40-yard dash. No wide receiver at the NFL Combine under 170 pounds has been that slow since 2003. You can't be slow and small in the NFL. Just won't work. Now, again, he's another one of those guys that the NGS data, the tracking data, the GPS, says that he's a lot quicker than that, his game speed. However, I'm sorry, it just can't work. It won't work in this offense, particularly. If a team wants to take a day 3 flyer on him and see if he can be their jet sweep guy or something like that, a gadget player, go ahead. But I do not need to see Tez Johnson in a Chiefs jersey. They've already got the small guy. They don't need a small, slow guy. Now, I'm being facetious. He's a very fast player, clearly faster than me. But I just don't think that the Chiefs need to go down this road here. Also, he's a 5th-year senior. He played almost his whole career with Bo Nix. It's a really great story, though. If you look up Tez Johnson's story, his parents, it's kind of like, honestly, a little bit like The Blind Side. Bo Nix's dad was a football coach, high school football coach. Tez Johnson didn't have a family. He was an orphan. Bo Nix's parents adopted him. He followed Bo Nix throughout his career. And then, once the Bo Nix left, he went and got Dylan Gabriel, another great college quarterback. In the Oregon offense, what wide receiver has what other offense has Oregon or what other receiver has Oregon really generated in the NFL right now? You know, like, I was super high on Troy Franklin last year. That did not go well. Okay. That take did not age well, right? There's a couple of tight ends that Oregon's generated, but for the most part, the offense has generated running backs and quarterbacks and tackles. And that's about it. So Tez Johnson, I am out on. Last guy here. This is a guy that you see mocked to the Chiefs occasionally at pick 31, and it's the defensive tackle out of Ohio State, Tyleik Williams. This to me is, I honestly to me, it's more of a preference thing. There was some rumors a couple years ago that the Chiefs were looking to trade up in the first round when the draft was in Kansas City for Mozzie Smith, the defensive tackle out of Michigan. Now, I've also heard conflicting reports that the reason why that was is because they really wanted to go up and get Anton Harrison, the tackle who the Jaguars drafted, and that Mozzie Smith was the smokescreen. I'm not really sure what. So far, historically, we've seen the Chiefs do nothing at defensive tackle since Jaron Reed, that experiment back in 2021 when they brought him over from the Seahawks. That was the first time we really saw a big investment from the Chiefs at defensive tackle next to Chris Jones. From then on, it's been later draft picks and older veterans. Shout out to Brett Veach. I think Derek Nottie not being on the Chiefs was a step in the right direction. They tried a different player with Jerry Tillery. They still don't really have a true nose tackle. Siaka Ika, the fourth, I believe he was a day 2 pick by the Browns out of Baylor. Also, he was on that 2019 LSU team as a redshirt freshman. Siaka Ika was just another insane player to be on that crazy team. I'm just not sure that this is the type of player that I want to see taken where he's going to be taken. First off, there's guys that I like more, right? Like if you want to tell me the Chiefs draft a run defense first defensive tackle, I'd much rather see Kenneth Grant at pick 31. Kenneth Grant, he's from Michigan, high level athlete. And there is a much clearer path to pass rush upside. This is a guy that I feel great about him lined up, head up over the center or shaded over the center or at the 3 tech. Part of my concern about Tyleik Williams, 6 career sacks in 3 years, right? Virtually no pass rush upside. Also playing again on a really talented defense with several defensive linemen who are going to get drafted. That's true of Kenneth Grant as well. But Kenneth Grant, much more elite athlete. And let's be clear, there's a lot of guys who can do what Tyleik Williams would be brought in to do on down in the draft. Heck, you could find those things on in day 3, like a Nazir Stackhouse from Georgia. There's a lot of guys out there who I think can bring that profile to the Chiefs, a run stuffing defensive tackle. If the Chiefs are going to be taking a defensive tackle in round in round 1, you want to see a guy who can really alter the math as a pass rusher, like a Walter Nolan, a guy like that. That's probably one of my favorite picks for the Chiefs at 31. I just love watching him on tape. To me, Tyleik Williams just does not move the needle enough. And I feel like you're going to be really hard pressed to look back at that pick in 3 or 4 years and say, yes, this was a success. Who is the guy that's been taken in the first round that's a run first stopping defensive tackle or nose tackle? The Eagles spent a ton of draft capital on Jordan Davis, who tested through the roof, right? And I think, things are going really well in Philadelphia right now. Jordan Davis is a part-time player. They have a never-ending quest for having all Georgia Bulldogs on defense. I think Jordan Davis is a good player, but I don't necessarily think that you look back on that draft pick and say, like, that's a home run. That was perfect. Honestly, it sounds like the best thing that Jordan Davis has done is help keep Jalen Carter in line. Well, hey, if the Chiefs want to end up with a top 10 pick and draft one of the best players in the draft, be my guest. But I wouldn't say that that's the plan, right? So Tyleik Williams, for me, he's off the board. It's just I'm not drafting him where he's going to be drafted. I think there's a good let's take another player, right? Tavondre Sweat went to the Titans, a highly explosive athlete with pass rush upside, taken in the 2nd round, right? Tavondre Sweat went to the Titans. And there were some real questions about him, right? A DUI during the draft process, big dummy, right? Like, what the heck? But I thought Tavondre Sweat was a much more explosive athlete. Another thing about Tyleik Williams, the weight has really fluctuated. He's fluctuated from what it has been reported from like 290 pounds to 330 pounds. That's the variance there is from, and I mean, like, look, I'm no one to judge, right? Like, depending on what I had for dinner, I fluctuate too. But like 3 tech to 1 tech is where you're varying from. What type of player are you getting here? Are you getting a true 1 tech that can line up and eat space and do not move out the line of scrimmage and occupy multiple gaps? Or are you getting a true 3 tech? That's another variance there. I think that the Chiefs need a lot of help there, but I think that there's guys that they can bring in on day 2 of the draft and have a defensive first run stuffing defensive tackle. I think that can be had otherwise, not at pick 31. So that is my do not draft list. Real quick, I'll run over it one more time. Joshua Simmons, the tackle out of Ohio State. James Pierce, the edge out of Tennessee. Harold Fannin, the tight end out of Bowling Green. Caleb Johnson, the running back out of Iowa. Elijah Arroyo, the tight end out of Miami. Tez Johnson, the wide receiver from Oregon. And Tyleik Williams, the defensive tackle out of Ohio State. Thank you so much for joining me today. Hey, if you like the draft content I do today, join us on Monday for the Intangibles. We're going to have Maddie Lane from KCSN on. We're going to be doing a Chiefs 7-round mock. We'll be running over that. And then Christian and I are going to be going over our top 10 running backs in this class. Cannot wait for that running back class. It is so fun to talk about. I can't quit watching running backs, man. It's just like every day, it's like, oh, it's Bashal Tutins, it's Marcus Yarns, it's Cam Scattaboo today, just going crazy on the running back. So it'll be a lot of fun. We're ramping up our draft coverage. Check out the Arrowhead Addict specific draft board for the Chiefs. It's pinned on my Twitter profile. It's also pinned on the Arrowhead Addict page. This is a draft board where you're not going to see quarterbacks. You're not going to see guards being taken at pick 31. Cough, cough, Todd McShay, who mocked them a guard at 31 today. It's going to be tailored towards the Chiefs specifically. So thank you so much for joining me on the NG hour instead of the OG hour. Hey, we're so close to 55,000 subscribers on YouTube. We're at 54.9. If you haven't and you're listening and you liked what you heard today, subscribe to us on YouTube, like the video. Thanks so much for hanging out with me today on this abbreviated OG hour. And as always, go Chiefs.